Welcome to episode 24 of the State Line Fast Break podcast. I am your host, Casey Boone. Alongside me, as always, the great Josh Miller.
Here we go. NBA offseason is locked and loaded. Let's break it all down. And are we going to see a Grizzlies and Nuggets Western Conference Finals this upcoming year?
I think there's a greater chance that we see the Grizzlies in the top 10 of the lottery than that happening, but there is a lot that has happened. NBA free agency kicked off in full force last week. Obviously, it's been couple weeks since we've recorded with a lot going on, 4th of July, some different things, but this gives us a jam-packed episode to start out. A ton of player movement. We've got the Miles Turner shocker to the Milwaukee Bucks. Apparently didn't even give Indiana the chance to match the offer. Nickeil Alexander-Walker ends up in Atlanta. DeAndre Ayton gets bought out from Portland. He ends up with the Los Angeles Lakers. Dorian Finney-Smith joins Kevin Durant in the Houston area, landing with the Rockets as they are projected to be a top team. Moving forward here in the Western Conference, Luke Kornet has signed a 4-year, 2-year fully guaranteed deal with the San Antonio Spurs. Jake LaRavia also joins Ayton on the Lakers. D'Angelo Russell to the Mavericks to be a fill-in for Kyrie. There's a ton of trades. We've seen Cam Johnson get traded to Denver for a 2032 first-round pick alongside Michael Porter Jr. The Heat, Jazz, and Clippers have completed a three-way deal, sending Norman Powell to Miami, John Collins to the Clippers, Kevin Love, Slow-Mo, and a second to Utah. There's the big news that has been pretty interesting to follow as Jonas Valanciunas apparently doesn't want to go to Denver after being traded to Denver for Dario Saric. Sexton to the Hornets. We've had so many contract extensions. The Oklahoma City Thunder just won the title and gave out $800 million. Paolo signed his rookie max. And news coming in as we have started the recording, New Orleans Pelicans forward Herb Jones has agreed to a 3-year, $68 million deal to stay in New Orleans. There is a lot going on, a ton to break down, but I think we should go ahead and start where I know your heart is at and where I have a lot of interest following this team. The Denver Nuggets are making a push once again with Nikola Jokic, who apparently just says, nope, not interested in signing an extension right now. Josh Kroenke, you're thinking about trading me? All right, we'll test out how contract negotiations go next summer. I expect he'll probably resign there when he's able to get the most amount of money, which is why he would wait. But interesting nonetheless, they have now landed Cam Johnson, Valanciunas, and got back their old buddy Bruce Brown. Josh, your thoughts on the Denver Nuggets?
The Denver Nuggets are back. They filled some of the holes that they were missing there in this playoff run in this 2024-25 season, where they had little to no depth, relied on Jokic just an unbelievable amount, resulting in him putting up arguably the best offensive season that I've ever seen statistically in as far as offense. And they move off of Michael Porter Jr. and he did a lot of good things for the Nuggets over his tenure, but ultimately just a lot of injuries. He was probably getting overpaid just according to his value there, what he was giving them night to night. Did help them win a championship, so he'll always have a place there. But they had no depth last year. Now you go out and get Cam Johnson, who's cheaper than Michael Porter Jr., and I think he's going to be just as good, if not better. I think he'll be a little more consistent and a little better of a defender. They're a really good three-point shooter. The only worry with him is making sure you can keep him up right and healthy, as he's missed a decent amount of games the past 2 years. But if they can keep him up and healthy, he fits that role, gives them more money, which they went out and spent for the first time I've seen there in the Jokic tenure that I can remember. As far as free agency goes, they go out and I said, get Cam Johnson. They go out and get Bruce Brown, who helped them tremendously in that championship run, who I wanted them to try and go get back at the deadline last year. They go out and finally get another center who can actually play basketball there in Jonas Valanciunas. And yeah, there's a lot of smoke going on there. I do think ultimately he will end up there with the Nuggets and he will fit that role just fine as long as they can keep him upright as well. And then they do go out and get Tim Hardaway Jr., who I haven't been super high on the past few years, but he had a pretty solid year there in Detroit last year. I just think the head coach there, what's forgot who what the name is there. Who did Denver there promote? David Adelman.
They
David
yeah,
Adelman.
they hired their interim head coach, David
Yeah,
Adelman,
I
after a
think.
pretty successful end of the regular season, and that playoff run was impressive
Yeah,
from his tenure
I
there.
I think he deserved it and he got it there. David Adelman. I think they'll use Hardaway as he's a very streaky shooter. I think if he's got it one game, they'll keep him in. If they see he ain't got it, go ahead and pull him out. He can be another offense. He's going to get good looks there with Jokic. There's no doubt about it. So now you got 7, 8 guys there, not including you hope Strawther takes another step. Um, you know, Potentially 8, 9 man roster there when really it's just been about a 5, 6 man, and then I think they do expect Christian Braun to take another step as he's looking to get paid as well. So I don't know. I really like what the Nuggets have done this offseason, and it's about time that they went out and were actually aggressive. I've been waiting on them to do something like this. A lot of these guys, yeah, they got their injury concerns, and really the whole team there with Denver, other than Jokic, has that. But if this team can stay upright, they were one. They took Oklahoma City to 7 games, and they had many injuries on their team. I think, I mean, it's a little early, but if I had to pick a team out of the West, I think Denver would be my team to come out as of right now.
That's a bold statement considering what Oklahoma City has been able to do. They have not really lost anybody on that roster as of this moment. And so I would lean to say that they are heavy title favorites once again, as I think they should be. And then you got to look at what the Houston Rockets have done. I mean, everybody's going to look at they went out and got Kevin Durant, but the moves around the margins that the Rockets have been able to maneuver with. They got Dorian Finney-Smith, who everybody kind of wrote off as going to re-sign with the Lakers. He didn't like the way that they were handling that negotiation, and it seems like the Lakers are trying to not take on salary that is beyond the year 2026, which heading into that 2027 free agency class, which projects to be absolutely loaded. Smart to build around Luka Doncic, which they're trying to do. You've able to re-sign Jabari Smith. He's going to be there. You've got Steven Adams back. You've got Clint Capella coming back to the Rockets, who they also went out and signed. So the big depth that this team is going to have, I think, is going to prove to be beneficial with the way the league is transitioning back more to big basketball. And so I think that's been a significant target of the Houston Rockets. And so I think that they're right up there. And then Denver, like you said, they've probably got the best player in the world right now. Depends on who you ask, but I would say consensus would be Jokic as the number one basketball player in the world, even regardless of what Shea and some of these other guys have done. But they are right at that tax apron line. They're about 2.8 million in front of the first apron, which could restrict them. Them and the Rockets are both kind of holding out from going into that apron level. I'm not trying to repay the repeater tax, but I think that's been something that you can kind of look at throughout the entire NBA this year with teams having to just randomly cut bait with players. We had the Damian Lillard wave and stretch so the Bucks could get Miles Turner. Very interesting in today's apron rules that they'd be willing to eat 25 million on their salary cap for the next 5 years. And it sounds like that's exactly what the Phoenix Suns are about to do with Bradley Beal, who could end up at another Western Conference team who also just made a big trade, who I think are going to be right up there with those two teams that me and you just talked about. And so there's a lot that's being affected by how this apron is operating. And I think that's been evident by some of the decisions that teams making. Nickeil Alexander-Walker not going back to Minnesota is a direct evidence of that, as the teams just can't afford to play it. The apron rules are so strict and they're so implicable about what the future of your franchise is if you go deep into these luxury tax, basically. So that's what I've been fascinated to see, and I think teams like Denver, who has made moves around the margin, getting guys at the minimum like Bruce Brown, like Tim Hardaway, smart basketball teams, and you're going to start seeing those type of salaries. And it's affected the restricted free agency market. We still got Jonathan Kuminga and several other guys still out there that just the free agency market is just not existent as to what it once was.
Yeah, the way, this last players agreement seems in certain ways to be a disaster for the way it's just affected it so much. When you look at it from that perspective, obviously there's many bonuses there, as Adam Silver's wanting. He doesn't really want dynasties. For as far we've had what, 7 straight different champions, I believe now. So that is also going to keep that going probably. So, but yeah, I mean, as far as, I didn't want to sound like I was only about Denver. There are a lot of teams I've really impressed with what they've done. Houston definitely being up there at the top. You mentioned already, but they went out, re-signed Steven Adams earlier. Went out and signed Clint Capella back, which, did they even need him? I'm not sure. And they still have so much. Like, who knows the Giannis thing? Like, they technically are still in a decent spot to, if he were to come available, they could manage it. Um, Even though they did this Durant deal. And to jump to the East real quick, the Pacers losing Turner to the Bucks, I don't know what the Bucks are doing. I am happy they got some of their guys back there. I didn't think they would get all back. They got Gary Trent Jr., who I thought, I wanted him on the Grizzlies, or even with Jokic there. I really like Gary Trent Jr. They got him back at a good price. Got Kevin Porter back, uh, and then Bobby Portis as well. But I don't know. Maybe I'm not the biggest fan of Miles Turner. I mean, I don't think he's a bad player by any means. He's a very good player. And I don't think that they necessarily overpaid. It was just seems like a reach to go do something like that. It was just a desperate move, in my opinion. Um, you know, when you could have, understand Lopez is older, but he immediately is going to go to the Clippers and make them even better. And he's not even going to have to start there at the Clippers. So I don't know. The Bucks roster is just really interesting to me, and then to stretch they're going to have what, 20 something million over the next couple of years, where it's just dead money. And then yeah, you mentioned Bradley Bill there, who I think you're referring to the Los Angeles Clippers being in the sweepstakes for him. Anyway, that's what a lot of the NBA podcast people there are looking like they feel like what's going to happen as far as Bradley Bill. Um, but I mean, I do think there's a couple teams. Do the Lakers look into Bradley Bill potentially? I think it'll be one of those LA teams. I do think the Lakers could use him. Not sure if they can fit that into their cap there, as LeBron's got them sort of handicapped, in my opinion. As I know, LeBron is worth the money he's getting based on his play compared to some of the other guys. But when you look at it from, do you want another ring perspective, I do think maybe he could have taken a pay cut to grab somebody else. There's also been a lot of smoke since we've last recorded about him being traded or not. don't see that happening unless he really just forces his way out. But where is he going to go? There's really nowhere at this point unless the Lakers took on most of the salary, which why would they even want to do that unless he's going to cause issues? But a lot of things going on. I mean, can we talk about the Hawks for a minute? You touched on their Alexander Walker for a second, but they went out and signed multiple guys. Who else did they get? They went and got. Uh, I'm drawing a blank here. There's been so many moves. I know the Hawks have went out and did a bunch of things that.
Yeah. You're referring to obviously the Chris Tapps moves that they
Oh
did.
yeah, yeah.
Um, they got Luke Kennard. I mean, they've really starting to shape around this roster. It's going to be really interesting to see kind of how Dyson Daniels, Okongwu, Reese O'Shea continue to develop, and then they're going to get Jalen Johnson back as well.
Who
The
he's been really good, and he was end up
Yeah,
with the injury last year.
and the Hawks are going to be in a position to where it's a weakened Eastern Conference, and they're one of those teams that made a couple big moves like Orlando that feels like there's an opportunity that they can make their way into the NBA Finals.
Yeah, I mean, and I was just writing them off just a couple of short weeks ago, and then they go out and do all these things. So really made me look stupid. I do think that they're going to be a really good basketball team. I mean, they definitely should be one of the top 5 seeds in the East, given what they went out and spent. Um, Still have some question marks surrounding their post play. Obviously, Porzingis doesn't really sit down there too much. If he's going to play, we'll see. And then, yeah, I think Norman Powell ending up on the Heat actually helps them a really good bit because if you look at their starting lineup, there might be a way where they can bring Powell off the bench in a way. I'm not real sure exactly what Spoelstra is going to do there with that, but that was also a team I was sort of writing off. And then the Clippers really have went out and done a number of things that we've talked about, but they went out and got John Collins, who I'm not the biggest fan of his either, but I mean, one of these moves that the Clippers made, excuse me, one of these moves that the Clippers made so far has to work. Whether if it's Lopez, if they get Beal, Collins, Chris Paul is still out there. Their team rumored for him. Where's Chris Paul going to end up? I think if he is as good as he was for your San Antonio Spurs last year, I think he can really go out there and help a team this upcoming year. And I believe he said this is going to be his last season.
Yeah, and it's like you mentioned, I think this is the obvious Bradley Beal destination. I think you don't make this move to trade away Norman Powell, who was a fringe all-star this year, if you don't have a very good feeling that once Bradley Beal is let out of his deal, that you're going to be the front runner to land him. I think the other team that would be in the conversation with Beal as of this point would be the Milwaukee Bucks. But the Clippers have a distinct advantage as they are the one team in the running here that have their full biannual exception and are under the first apron to where they can give him that full biannual of about 5 point something million. So when the buyout occurs with Phoenix, he's obviously going to give a little bit of money back to Phoenix, as that's typically how these buyouts go out. And then he's going to be able to sign a contract upon that with another team. And so he's going to be able to double dip in terms of money coming in. And so I think the Clippers are the obvious destination. The Heat were the other one that I thought would be in the running for him. But of course, as they're the ones getting Norman Powell, that probably takes that out of the running. And so I think we're going to see the Clippers really load up here. And I think there's a possibility that they can land Chris Paul and Bradley Beal. They're 8.5-ish million under that first apron. And they have a trade exception still that they could sign and trade Chris Paul into to keep themselves with Beal getting the biannual exception, Chris Paul feeling that trade exception, and they can stay under the first apron and they can put together a roster of Chris Paul, Bradley Beal, James Harden, Kawhi Leonard, Collins, Zubac, Derrick Jones Jr., Bogdanovich is still there. Brook Lopez, they just re-signed Nicholas Batum. And so I think this could be a really competitive roster that has depth in the backcourt. If they get Paul, Beal, Harden, depth in the front court, Collins, Zubac, Brooke Lopez, and then obviously you've got Kawhi Leonard, who's the ultimate wild card at this point. If he's on the floor, he's one of the 10 best players in the world, but there's no telling if he's going to be on the floor at any moment. So I really like the outlook for the Clippers specifically. In terms of that trade, it's interesting to see Utah just continue to shed away these older veteran players. They did a trade with the Charlotte Hornets that sent Sexton and a second round pick to the Hornets for Yusuf Nurkic. It's a lot hard for a lot of people in the sports space. You'll see many people that cover just confused by the move, like having to give up assets to attach to Sexton, but that's a really hard salary at this point with the new rules to trade around 20 million. Not a lot of teams can afford to take that kind of contract on, as there's not a lot of players in the league that once you get to that number, they're going to be shipped around and moved around a ton. And then Utah's just playing the tank game here. They're at the lowest rated over under in many, many years at like 18 games. I don't even know if they're going to get to 18, how bad that roster is going to be. And then you're going to continue to get question marks around Lowry Markin. And I know there's going to be Jazz people and Jazz fans that say, well, we couldn't have traded these guys for any value at any other time to actually get back assets that were worth it. I don't really buy that. You could have probably offloaded some of these guys a little bit earlier and maybe recouped just even you getting a second round pick instead of having to give a second round pick to attach these guys. So I'm not the biggest fan of Utah waiting this long, but it is good for them to pick a direction. And I don't expect a Lowry trade to happen imminently or even right now during the summer, but you have to imagine that when Lowry signed that contract extension, that he was under the influence that maybe they would try to retool a little bit quicker. It looks like Utah is headed towards a multiple year bottom out and just hope one of these prospects hits, whether it's Ace Bailey or whoever they take inevitably in the top five next year.
Yeah, that is they just do not care about this upcoming season a single bit. It's almost laughable at this point. But yeah, we've talked about a lot of teams. Let's talk about our two teams here a little bit. Um, I'll start with the Grizzlies and then talk a little about the Spurs, and I'll let you jump in there. So the Grizzlies go out and re-sign Jaren Jackson to a big extension. Wouldn't have missed out on a little bit there, not getting Defensive Player of the Year. And then just about a couple of days later, we get news he's got a foot or toe injury. He's going to miss time, and it's just no surprise to me whatsoever. I wouldn't have. I wish we honestly would have traded him. Just to be quite honest with you, he's a very good player, but I just don't think he's worth that much. I do think that going out and signing Ty Jerome was really good for us, and quite frankly, he might be our best player next year at times. So I believe that truly. It's funny now, but you're going to see Ja Morant miss so much time. It happens year in year out, and Ty Jerome's going to just get to light it up. He's just going to get to go haywire like he did at times with the Cavaliers, and I hope for him to have a really good season if he can replicate what he did there in the regular season last year with the Cavs, not in the playoffs by any means. And really, the number one move that I'm happy we did was re-signing Aldama, which I thought there was a chance we may lose him. I'm really happy that we re-signed him. I think he's better than Jaren Jackson Jr. at times. Just to be honest, I know these probably seem like hot takes, but and also Zach Edey, he's hurt, so I don't know what's happening there. The good thing is Jalen Wells. We somehow got extremely lucky with drafting him in the second round last year. He's been a lifesaver for this organization, and I think he's going to get even better next year. Looks like we may end up trading Cole Anthony at any point. I don't really know how to feel about that quite yet. We'll see what we can get in return if we do go ahead and do that. I still just think we're pretty weak down low. If we're not going to have Edie, we got traded. I can't remember if we traded or lost uh, Jay Huff, who actually did some decent things for us last year. He's going to join Rick Carlisle and the Indiana Pacers. We still have Scottie Pippen Jr. I think you're going to see Scottie Pippen Jr., Ty Jerome, Santi Aldama, Jalen Wells, and KCP. Those are going to be our best players next year, and they're going to carry us hopefully to the Western Conference Finals. And we're just going to, I'm joking there, but we're known to somehow put a decent amount of wins together each year there with these guys who aren't maybe the top names that you would think of, but a lot of that was to do with Taylor Jenkins, who is now gone. Um, so that's going to be a big wild card for us there, if how we're going to be able to continue success without the star names. But I like some of the things we've done this offseason and some of the things not so much with some of the extensions there with Jaron, and then ends up getting an injury just a few days later. And then on your San Antonio Spurs, man, you got to really feel good about what they've done going and getting Dylan Harper there at pick 2, and then going and getting one of the holes that they needed is another center, and they go out and get Luke Cornett, who I think probably had a pretty decent market for. To be honest, I think he's a pretty good player. I mean, you know what you're going to get from him. He's got his role, and he's going to do it to the best of his ability. He's going to rebound. He's going to block shots. He's going to catch lobs. He's going to sit around the rim, and I think he can honestly do a lot of the dirty work there, with Wemby being more on the perimeter side of things. And then, yeah, looks like y'all still have Harrison Barnes, who you liked a lot last year. I'm curious to see who's going to be in that starting lineup. Just to be honest, I think Mitch Johnson's got a couple of things he would he would like to maybe mess with and see what's going to be best. But overall, as a diehard Spurs fan, how would you grade on a F to A scale there your San Antonio Spurs offseason up to this point?
It's hard to put an exact grade on it. Um, I would lean in the range of B to B plus. I think you filled exactly what you needed to do this offseason to give yourself a chance to be a competitive playoff team next season, which I think is the ultimate goal with this roster. You mentioned the Luke Cornett deal. I thought that was a home run in terms of what this roster has been missing since Wembanyama got here. I've not had a reliable big man. You had a walking garbage can out there named Zach Collins for about a year and a half until he was traded. And so to clear that in the Fox deal was a win and a loan. And now to replace him with a guy like Luke Cornett, who's been a part of a championship roster and has been a key piece for the Boston Celtics the last few years. And it's on a deal that face value, they tell you it's four for 41, but really the deal is two for about 24-ish million. There's going to be two fully guaranteed years at the start of the deal, and then the third year is partially guaranteed at about 3 million, and then the rest of the contract is non-guaranteed. So you really don't handicap yourself at all beyond 2 years, which was very smart doing. If he performs up to the contract, you just keep him at that dollar amount, which will be a steal as the cap keeps going up, as the new NBA broadcasting rights money starts to kick in. So I was very happy with that deal. And then you clear off some of the bottom tier of the roster that are going to be facing contract years in Malachi Branham and Blake Wesley to go out and get another backup big and Kelly Olynyk. From that standpoint, I think you add a third big to provide insurance if something does happen to either Wemby or Cornette. You're giving yourself the best chance to manage any scenario throughout the regular season. Everybody knows about the guard depth that this team has. It's been well documented through the draft with Fox, Harper, Castle. You re-sign Jordan McLaughlin, give yourself a fourth guard, and then you've got plenty of wings. I think the focus point of this offseason was draft Dylan Harper. They got very fortunate that I think somebody that was probably top 7 or 8 on their board fell to 14 in Carter Bryant. And then you add exactly what you needed in Luke Kornet and Kelly Olynyk. That would probably wrap up what the Spurs are going to do at this point in the offseason. This was a team that they're desperate for playoff minutes with their current roster. Not any of them have seen the playoffs since they've been there. They haven't made it since 2019. They're desperate to just get their feet wet, and then you could see a Houston Rockets like trade and ascension next offseason when somebody may become available, or at the deadline if a Giannis or somebody like that they could sprinkle their way into those conversations. But I thought it was a really productive offseason. You're still below the cap. You're not paying ridiculous for this team, but I think it's going to be a team that is going to be really competitive in the Western Conference and is going to have a very good shot at least making the play in. And I think there's going to be a chance that you see this team climb into 6, 7, 8-ish range if all things go well and people reach the level that the organization thinks they can reach. In terms of the Grizzlies, I think they did well in this offseason. I'm a fan of Santi Aldama, just like you had mentioned. I think he had a very robust market and was heavily sought after, and I did not expect to see them re-sign him. But again, with some of the bird rights that they have and the apron rules, I think that really played in their favor. Cole Anthony's got kind of a difficult market. And then you add, of course, Ty Jerome. You've already got Scottie Pippen Jr. in the back court with him. Wells, Cam Spencer, I thought was a productive ad. And so I think it's going to be exciting to see those guys kind of step in to the bench roles. They're going to have a fun team to watch next year, especially if Jaw can stay healthy. We'll see what happens with Jaren Jackson with that turf toe injury, how much time he might miss. But it's a fun roster. It's going to be a roster that, again, is going to be competing in the play-in. Just unfortunate how stacked the Western Conference is for both of our teams. You go down the list of Western Conference NBA teams, and it is just a gauntlet. There's legitimate chance that 14, well, probably 13, because I don't see the Pelicans or the Jazz being remotely competitive. But the Blazers, their win total only being at 34, they won 36 games, and I think they got better adding Drew Holiday and making some moves that they have made. I think they're going to be a hard team to play against. The Phoenix Suns, obviously, they lose Kevin Durant and they're going to lose Bradley Beal, but I think the depth of that roster is improved over what it was last year. They don't have the star talent. I think they're probably going to be the odd man out. They're probably going to be the 13th seed. We'll see what happens there. The Mavericks, D'Lo will be a serviceable replacement for Kyrie, and then you stick in Cooper Flag alongside Anthony Davis. That team's going to be really good. The Kings are the most confusing team in basketball, have no clue what they're doing. They got a roster, a bunch of mediocre talent, mediocre assets. That organization is a wasteland in the NBA world. They should probably move from Sacramento, go somewhere where maybe they have a chance to put a formidable team together. They need to sell the team, sell the roster, sell everything. So they're probably going to be right down there with the Suns, but the rest of these teams, the Warriors are going to be good as long as they have Curry, Draymond, Jimmy. Timberwolves just made the Western Conference Finals. The Clippers, we've talked about them, especially if they get Bradley Beal, they're going to be really good. The Nuggets have Jokic, enough said. The Lakers, I hope they win 5 games, but they've got Luka Doncic and LeBron James. And so there's no way you can count either one of those players out. We've talked about the Rockets and Thunder at nauseum. That's 12 basketball teams right there. They're going to be fighting for 8 spots. Where they come in at, who knows? It's going to be peak entertainment to watch the Western Conference this year. And then you got the Eastern Conference, which you can probably throw a bunch of bunny rabbits out in the field and watch them fight, and it'll probably be more entertaining than the tankathon we're going to see out in that side of the conference.
Yeah, no, that was just exactly well said. Going down the list of that Western Conference, the Trailblazers, I'm with you. You're a huge Denny guy, so he continues to take another step. I do like Chauncey Billups as their coach there. They got the Chinese Jokic. We'll see how that works. And then I think that defense, man, I think we touched on it there back last episode, I believe. But I do think that defense is just like you said. It's just going to be annoying. It's going to be really annoying. I would like to see them in some competitive games this year. Maybe get some primetime slots. I would hope so. I'd like to see Denny on that stage. And then I think this will be a good transition to another major topic that's going through the media. Maybe that's good, maybe it's bad. I'm not sure. Is DeAndre Ayton leaving the Blazers and joining up with Luka Doncic and LeBron James? Um, I think this has kind of gone throughout the media the past couple of days. It's a little 50-50 in my opinion. Some people are raving about it. Some people are more hesitant to see kind of what's DeAndre Ayton's mindset going to be. That's sort of the main question there. He's been about a 16-10 career guy, not a bust by any means, but he was drafted over Luka Doncic in that 2018 draft. And I don't know. I'm just really curious. They needed a center badly. I thought they were going to be able to go make a trade. I don't think anyone wanted to do a deal with them, to be honest. I think the league looked at them and was like, no, you know what? We know what y'all need. We don't want to even go out there and do it. I'm surprised they didn't get Lopez. I think they probably tried. He ends up going to the Clippers, though. So um, I'm curious to see your thoughts on Aiton because he can do a lot of the things that they will need. I mean, obviously, he's not very good on defense, which is really going to hurt them, but he's got a really good midi. He's got really good pick and roll abilities at times, and he's going to be able to catch lobs from Luca, mainly Luca, but also LeBron a lot of the time. So, he's going to help them out a lot on the offensive end, in my opinion. But as far as their defense goes, which is really what hurt them the most, what's your concern level on that?
I would be very concerned about the Lakers defense. Quite frankly, I don't think this roster is very good at all. I like some of the pieces on it. Obviously, when you've got Luka Doncic, you're always going to be in a good spot. LeBron we'll get into here in just a second, but in terms of what Ayton brings, I still am not quite sure that he is the perfect center to put around Luka Doncic. He hasn't been this traditional rim running center in his career. I think playing next to Luka that will improve because that seems to be what he does with every center around him. Laravia, I think, is actually a very good piece to put next to Luka, and that'll be a fun player to watch for that team. Still not sure I'm convinced that Luka and Reeves are good fit long term, and it doesn't sound like Austin Reeves is going to be willing to sign the extension that the Lakers are able to offer at this point, so would not be shocked to see him off the roster. But they got priced out of the big market. All of the centers in the market signed for probably more than what the Lakers were looking to put in, considering that after the Ayton signing, they are only just under $1 million in front of that first apron. And it sounds like they are not willing to go into that. And they are doing the exact opposite of what LeBron James wants them to do. That's why they have put out statements when they have made the other big moves that they have made this offseason, whether it was getting DeAndre Ayton, signing Jake LaRavia, or even Jackson Hayes. There was a little bit of, hey, and a statement from Palinka, the organization, that those moves had been made. But when LeBron opted into his contract, silence from his side, silence from LeBron. The only thing we've heard from LeBron James is there's a lot of uncertainty whether he's going to be there for the duration of his career, if that's going to be his final landing spot. It sounds like from everybody that would be in the know that the Lakers are very much operating under this year as a solo investment with LeBron James and Luka Doncic, and that they're operating in future years to not add cost on the books. So once LeBron James is off this roster, they can properly build the team that they envision to put around Luka Doncic, which is precisely the vision that Rob Pelinka has at this point, and they are not giving in to the demands of LeBron James. I think it's absolutely hilarious and what he deserves for all the hell that he's given him in the 8 years that he's been there. And if you're the Lakers, you have been gifted the golden boy, Luka Doncic, and you have to be willing to build around him regardless of what your 41-year-old superstar says. So good on them, good on Pelinka, good on the Buss family, the Walton family who's buying the team. I think it's smart direction to go into, and they're keeping their books clean for 2027 as you're seeing the Crosstown team and the Clippers do, as you're seeing many of the high profile teams in the league do, as that is slated to be a star-studded year and the cap is expected to jump upon the arrival of this new TV rights deal.
Yeah, and the Lakers have a funny opportunity to roll out a lineup of Luca, Austin Reeves, Dalton Connect, Jake LaRavia, all in one line. I'm just joking, but uh, I'm with you. I just think the roster has a lot of potential if they didn't. And I hate to say because like LeBron does so much for him. He's obviously he's still. I think he's still a top 10 player in the league, but he still costs so much money. They could really go. They just have, like you said, a lot of holes there. I don't like how they handled the Finney Smith thing, and I probably deep down feel like Luca didn't really like that either, knowing that he and Dorian Finney Smith were pretty close on and off the court. And it looks, I don't know exactly, but it looks like there was some weird things going on with Palinka maybe talking about a certain injury to other teams. Well, Houston went out and said, we don't care. We're going to go ahead and pay him. And that's what they should do because he's your traditional 3-and-D player in today's game. And he was one of the only players that JJ Redick trusted in the playoffs. And there was only about 4 or 5 players that JJ Redick trusted. And I just don't see why you would want to re sign Jackson Hayes after JJ Redick just completely doghoused him in that series against the Timberwolves, and not to blame him for doing so. I'm just saying it's like I don't understand why you do that, and somehow there's a no trade clause on Jackson Hayes' contract. That makes no sense to me. Maybe
He
I
has,
hope.
I think that's actually since been, he has actually given that up
Okay.
um, under, it's kind of a, it's not specifically a no trade like per se, but he has the right to kind of exercise once you re-sign on the minimum coming off um, your team having those bird rights. There's some sort of weird clause in there where they can kind of manufacture where they want to be. But because he took more than the minimum coming off that deal, he has foregoed that ability. So he does have the ability to be traded. But what's even more interesting as we talk about Dorian Finney-Smith is the Lakers have made it abundantly clear that they're not going into future years cap space with these contracts that they're giving out. Well, the Dorian Finney-Smith contract is structured to where the only 2 years that are guaranteed are the first 2 years, and it would come off your books when they're looking to clear space. So there was very clearly something here where they negotiated under bad faith, and it just rubbed Dorian Finney-Smith the wrong way because they could have very easily made this deal happen.
Yeah, and that's where I just raise. If I were a Lakers fan, I'm thinking, hold on there, Rob Pelinka. What are we thinking on that? I understand we're handicapped as far as roster goes, but they had enough room, like you said, to get that done. And they did go out and get Laravia, who's a Grizzlies legend, who, I liked him. I saw him play in person. He's a good player, but I'll take Dorian Finney-Smith over him right now, in my opinion, especially knowing that Dorian Finney-Smith and Luka Doncic relationship is already there. But Luka will be able to adapt, I think, and just to talk about Reeves, I thought there was a decent chance that he was going to get moved based on how he wasn't very good in that Timberwolves series, but I just I think that they are going to look past that, and I do think that they're going to re-sign him next year, unless there's some sort of different package they can get. If they can get him next year for a good amount, uh, if the, thinking this is LeBron's last year anyway. That's what I'm sort of going off of. So they would have more room to be able to do something like that. But if the Aiton thing doesn't work out, they're not super handicapped because they're not paying him that much. But if that doesn't work out, what are they going to do at the center position? I mean, because there's a lot of question marks around Aiton. We'll see. His press conference there to yesterday or the day before. He said all the right things and all those things like that. He's not going to take the opportunity for granted, but there's a reason why Portland wanted to move off of him, even though he had a stretch there on that Blazers 10-game winning streak. If you recall that during last season, where he actually, I believe that was a stretch where Aiton was playing extremely well. So he's very capable. But it's a question mark. So like I said, but Luka makes all centers better. We saw Gafford and Lively really just looked extremely good with Luka. He just creates such lob space, and he's such a good lob passer that he's able to get a lot of those completed to the bigs. But yeah, I don't know. If I'm a Lakers fan, I'm a little upset with how this offseason went. And like we've talked about here, I think the media is kind of split there on the Aiton thing, but they're filling their main need. But I still think that they're missing athleticism there on the wing position. And now you lose Finney Smith on top of that. So I don't know. I think we should jump in there to one thing that we've talked about in previous episodes that's finally done in the actual favorites, I believe, either favorites or second favorites to come out of the Eastern Conference. And the New York Knicks finally grab a head coach, and it's none other than Mike Brown, who is fresh off of getting fired mid-season by the Kings, has now made his way to New York, and he's inheriting a very good roster who was just a game away from the Eastern Conference Finals back-to-back seasons. So we're excited to hear your thoughts on what this hire means for them, and it's in my opinion, it's finals, at least a finals appearance or bust for or no, they were in the Eastern Conference Finals. I misspoke there earlier, but this is a finals or bust, in my opinion, for the Knicks. Because when you look at it that way, it's sort of unfair to put Mike Brown in a position like that. But just the way the roster is, the way that they got rid of Tibbs, and the way that they did, this is in the way the Eastern Conference is. This is for two teams for sure in New York and Cleveland are absolute must get to the finals this season. No questions asked.
The Knicks get rid of the best coach they've had in 20 years to hire somebody that's going to have very similar old school philosophies in terms of the way he manages rotations and practices, and he's going to be tough on players just the way Tibbs was. Makes no sense to me. And again, like you said, it is finals or bust for this team. No if and or buts about it. Um, there's been reports that he had heavily coveted OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam when he was the head coach for the Sacramento Kings, trying to get that organization to make those moves to get those players to put next to De'Aaron Fox. They didn't do it. Obviously, the Knicks have OG. They have Mikal Bridges. It was funny. I think there was like some fan that met up with him like on the street or somewhere and was like asking him to trade um either OG or um Mikal Bridges, and he was like, they ain't taking my wings from me or something like that. So he very clearly has a plan and a vision for those two guys specifically. So we'll see how he manages those two personalities. I think he'll be used to having a guard like Jalen Brunson, who left-handed point guard, just like De'Aaron Fox was. I think he'll manage him well. It'd be interesting to see if he is as well liked there as what Tibbs was with a lot of players. Obviously, Tibbs got after him and played him a lot of minutes and played him hard, but it seemed like he was well liked by the star players there. And really, Mike Brown's last several stops, whether it was the assistant in Golden State or in Sacramento, he hasn't really had a star center like what Karl Anthony Towns was. I think Sabonis plays the game much different than what Towns does. So it'd be very intriguing to see how he uses Karl Anthony Towns, what role we see him kind of morph into. But look, it's championship or bust for them. I don't have a strong opinion one way or another. I would have liked to seen them do something, um, either a fresh face that hasn't had that opportunity yet, or if you were going to make a retread hire, hire somebody that had a job that was just you make them an offer that they couldn't say no to. They tried to do that with several NBA guys. Who knows what talks they had with some college guys? Did they even have a discussion about Danny Hurley maybe when he's a Northeast guy? I would have been interested to see if that was be a job that he would have entertained. We know he turned down the Lakers job just last year before JJ got it. So that's something that's interesting to me. I don't have major feelings one way or another. I think getting rid of Tibbs, hiring Mike Brown is just meh, bleh, and they really haven't done a whole lot in the offseason. I do like the Gershon job, Yuseli signing. They go out and get Jordan Clarkson, so they're increasing the depth of this roster, which we saw struggle a little bit last year. So I do like some of those moves. Mr. Robinson being back and healthy would be a big boost to them, but it's them, Cleveland, Atlanta, Orlando in the Eastern Conference from what I really have my eye on right now. I wish the Pistons would have been more aggressive and made another move, but I think the Pistons very much view this season like what the Rockets viewed last season, where they're just going to let their guys ride out, see what they've got, and maybe make a splash next offseason. Um,
And
so it's wide
yeah,
open.
yeah, the Pistons did go get Duncan Robinson.
That
Um,
doesn't move the needle whatsoever, in my opinion. Couldn't even find minutes on a pretty bad Miami Heat team, so
yeah,
whatever.
I
You lose
mean,
Malik Beasley, who decides he wants to gamble and pretty much blow his entire NBA salary before he's even out of the league. It's just sad that that's what's happening to the Pistons because I was a big fan of the way that that team was trending.
yeah, and they lose Hardaway, who did some decent stuff for them at times last year. So
I do like them going out and getting Karis LeVert. I thought that was
oh
a
yeah, I
pretty
forgot
decent
about
signing.
that.
So,
He'll
I
be
mean,
good.
they've made some additions and tried to maneuver around the fact that they lost Malik Beasley, but
Just around the margins, though.
yeah, it doesn't nothing that's going to move the needle and improve them significantly without big jumps from getting Jaden Ivey back, who I think will be very important for that roster. And then they're going to need a Sore Thompson to take in a Min Thompson like jump for this team to really even be remotely interesting.
Yeah. To go back to the Knicks, I mean, you talked about the guys they've signed. They have 9 players that they are going to have to play, or that they're going to be capable of playing, with that really good starting lineup, and then McBride and Robinson, now Clarkson and Yabusele. I mean, that's a really good roster. Like I think we do both agree that's his championship or bust in a year one for Mike Brown. So we'll see if they can go get it done. The pressure's on them. Another team that is loaded with pressure, in my opinion, especially coming off last year. A lot of question marks, but haven't really done a whole lot this offseason in the Cleveland Cavaliers, who really aren't being talked about a ton right now. I mean, which rightfully so. It was a very disappointing playoff run, but I mean, for majority of the year last year, there was a lot of questions. Are the Cleveland Cavaliers the best team in basketball for a good portion of the season? There, as they were hanging in Oklahoma City for a while, but you know, what are they just saying? Let's just run it back. Did and maybe I'm forgetting? Did they make any small moves around the margin that you can think of there?
Yeah, we when we talked about it a little in the episode, they went out and got Lonzo Ball, who I think is going to
Okay,
be
okay, yes, yes,
who I
forgot
think is
about
going to
that.
be a very good player for them and is going to increase
Yeah.
the defensive floor of this team, which they've already got a defensive
Hmm.
player of the year candidate, Evan Mobley, and then an underrated signing who I think is very good depth for them, Larry Nance Jr. I do like that move for them. Brought back Sam Merrill, but just this team is so deep into the luxury tax. They're $20 million over the second apron once again. They just completely flopped out in the playoffs last year. If you have another year like that, and you're placing the repeater tax and some of those repeater year apron disciplines where it locks up future draft picks from being moved in transaction or transactions, this team has a very bleak outlook if they don't start putting together some serious playoff success.
Yeah,
And then
and
look, there's major question marks still. Can a backcourt of Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell be successful?
yeah, and this is my point. Them and the Knicks are just absolute must at bare minimum get to the finals this season, in my opinion. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it, like you said, with the Knicks. But I think we should be viewing the Cavs the exact same way. I think Kenny Atkinson and his staff, after losing some of his staff there, is just under a tremendous amount of pressure, and a lot of it's to do with the stuff you just mentioned, but also the Eastern Conference as a whole. But what this is just going to come down to, again, more so in the Western Conference, as you talked about all those teams, it's going to come down to matchups once again next year. And we're going to say this over and over and over, but it makes sense when you put it into perspective like this. You have the Thunder walk out of the West. So, the Thunder struggled with teams like Denver, who were very close to beating them with many injuries, and then had zero struggles with Minnesota, who Denver can't seem to beat. So it's just, the Lakers actually match up really good with the Thunder, but they got beat in five by the Timberwolves. And then, it's just like it's going to come down to those very last few games of the season again next year to see where the teams are going to be slotted. But that's what makes each individual game so important, because you want to be able to put yourself in a good enough position out of the play in, but then you have to worry about who you're going to be matched up with. And that's not something that you're necessarily thinking about in the season. You're not trying to lose games on purpose to avoid teams and whatnot, but that's just how it's going to go. And it's going to be the same at maybe not as big a scale, but in the Eastern Conference. So we all I'm saying is we better see a crash collision course for Cleveland to be matched up with New York, or it's just going to be something's getting blown up. Is Mitchell leaving? Is Cat leaving? Is Garland out? Is McCall or OG gone? I mean, I just think there's a lot of dominoes there that we're going to be able to see, because not both of them can make it to the finals, and there's a chance neither one of them make it to the Eastern Conference Finals. And obviously, I wouldn't bet on that, but this stuff is unpredictable at times, and I think a lot of people. I know you were pretty high on the Pacers even at that point, but I'm not. Actually, you may have picked the Pacers in that Cavs series. I can't remember. I think you
I
actually
did.
might have been. Yeah,
Yeah,
you might have been one of the only ones there, but they were heavy underdogs in that series. So I don't know. We're gonna see, and it looks like the Pacers have already came out and said Tyrese Halliburton is not going to even try to play next season, which I actually think is a smart move. Um, but so I don't know. That's what all my point there is. Cleveland and New York have more pressure on them than probably any two teams in the league next year.
If you look at the guys that the Orlando Magic have on the guard and the wing spot with Suggs, Bane, Wagner, even Paolo, the only real wing defender in their starting lineup that they have is DeAndre Hunter. And even he wasn't super impactful on the defensive end when he got there to change their outlook. Like Garland and Mitchell are such a liability defensively in that backcourt. Like in the playoffs, they can't play together. And I think there's a chance that if Lonzo Ball remains on that team, that he is going to play over Darius Garland at multiple stops throughout the playoffs because you need Mitchell what he provides you on the offensive side of the floor. But Garland just seems to be redundant in terms of that department, and then is maybe even worse of a defender from Donovan Mitchell, who is not a good defender. And that goes for the Knicks, who have Brunson, Mikal, OG. That goes all the way to the Atlanta Hawks, who I think are going to be a team fighting for legit playoff success in the Eastern Conference this year. Trae Young, Johnson, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Risa Shea, Dyson Daniels, like they got some dudes on the wing. I That would be my main concern. You're paying a team $20 million over the second Abert, and you just don't have a lot of wing defensive help, which is, I think, is exactly why they went and got Lonzo Ball to replace what Ty Jerome filled because they're expecting Garland to be healthy and can put up the offensive production that Ty Jerome had in the playoffs. And you just slot Lonzo Ball in there as that wing defender, point guard defender that they were missing in the playoffs last year. They just got abused. And so I like that addition, but I have so many question marks regarding that roster, especially one that is that expensive. And I think that's what's going to be really interesting about the Thunder is they're going to be paying three guys 60 and then almost 50 and 50 combined. That's 160 million for three players when those extensions kick in the next season. So they are set up better than just about any other team to handle that because of all of the young players they have on cheap contracts. You still got Wallace, Topic, just drafted Storber. AJ Mitchell has been a star in the summer league so far. And then you've got all of those draft picks to replace it. But I would be a little nervous if I was Sam Presti handing out all these contracts, knowing the implications that it's going to have down the line. And that's just kind of the apron world again that we're going to just keep harping on that we live in now, that it's just going to kill teams as they hand out these massive contracts.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't even talked about the Thunder up until now, really, and that's just because they are in the prime position. They're going to be heavy favorites. They already are to repeat. And based on what they did last year, based on how young they are, it's what normal NBA history would say there. But um, you're right. Throwing out all of that money, I mean, I would have done it as well just because they're so young and you just hope that they're just going to get even better and you have all that stuff around them. That's cheap right now. You're able to do something like this. I just think you can't break it up at this point, especially when you're anticipating Chet to be even better. Obviously, Jalen Williams has really gotten better, even dropping the 40-point game there in the finals. He's just got to be a little more consistent on the offensive end, which I
And,
think he can be.
and if you haven't gotten a chance to go through and watch the video that he posted on his YouTube account about the pain endurance that he went through in the playoffs after he had suffered that fractured wrist late in the regular season, 30 plus pain injectors. He had to ice it um, pretty much every time he stepped off the court. He couldn't sleep at night because how painful it was. There was times of the shots that he took pregame wore off by the time the fourth quarter happened in several of these games to where just excruciating pain went through his entire shooting arm throughout many of these games late in the game. So just insane that he was able to do what he did.
Yeah, and I didn't even realize that. That makes it that more impressive because, and it makes sense on why at times his shot was not falling, but he really exploded at times. He's not really someone who has a sort of set thing he does on the offensive end. He just kind of finds little ways to score all throughout. He's really good at driving to the rim, using both hands. Obviously, he can slam it. He's not scared to go up and try and dunk on somebody. He likes I think he prefers the mid range, and then even can knock down the three. So, and then that's just his offensive scoring outlook. He does all the other things pretty to very elite for his age. So, I just think you have to do it. It seems like a lot of money, and it is, but you've wrapped up one guy who already is a superstar and two stars who have superstar potential. You have to go do it. Um, but I get what you're saying. It's when you look at it on face value, it's just unbelievable the amount of money they're dishing out. But and uh, obviously they probably going to be the one seed again. It's just going to come down to what road they're going to get when the playoff comes down in health. They've been pretty fortunate with health, other than Chet Holmgren in the regular seasons, but that's what it'll come down to for them because they're going to be elite. You know, their defense is going to show up, and defense wins championships, as Nico Harrison always says. So, but speaking of the Nico Harrison, we did talk about it a little bit, but D'Angelo Russell signing there, I've got mixed emotions on it. I was really high on the Mavericks because I like what Cooper Flag's going to become. And when they signed D'Angelo Russell, I kind of hit the pause button. I was really hoping for a Chris Paul signing there, but they go with D'Angelo Russell, who has been with Anthony Davis before, if that matters. I really don't know how to feel because D'Angelo Russell usually gets to teams and usually they get worse. So I don't know how to feel about D'Angelo Russell on the Mavericks. I hope he can just go out there and pass, be more of the passing guy. He's a great passer. He just at times he doesn't look to pass. And then when a shot's not falling, he can really be a liability because he does not defend either. So I don't know. I'm kind of iffy on the D'Angelo Russell move. I got to see it. I think at times he's going to look really, really good. And then at times he makes plays where you scratch your head. And then obviously he is not the playoff performer that he's been a very poor playoff guy. If you go back to some of the years there against the Nuggets, he was dropping games of 0 points as a starter. So I'm not real sure on how to feel about that, but I like everything else on the Dallas roster. Well, we've talked about that roster enough, but they haven't done much other than add D'Angelo Russell, which they don't really have any money at this point. And so I don't think that they're really able to go get a Chris Paul. I would have liked a Chris Paul better on the Mavericks as opposed to D'Angelo Russell, but that's more of just a personal preference. But, you know, we have talked about a lot of teams here. I'm sure we didn't even get to everybody that we wanted to. Um, but it's just been so much movement from top to bottom that uh, I just we've tried to do as much as we can there, but I really think a couple teams that we've talked about the most there at the Houston Rockets, the Denver Nuggets. I do want to give credit to your Spurs for what they've done. They've played it slow, and it's probably going to work out for them. It's done it. It's happened before. It looks like it's going to happen again as Wemby looks to even take another step. So a couple of those teams there have done really impressive things, along with the Atlanta Hawks that I just want to tip my cap to and say they are looking to Orlando Magic as well. I appreciate the teams who see the opportunity and want to go take advantage of it. And I really want to say good on the Nuggets for trying to do something there with Nikola Jokic coming up for that contract extension next year.
Yeah, nothing. The whole D'Angelo Russell to Dallas doesn't move me much in terms of their outlook. I think it just gives them a steady in hand at the point guard that's got experience. That again, like you said, it's going to give you some highs, going to give you some lows, but it's at least going to be better than the options that they had, considering Kyrie's going to be out for most of next season, if not all of next season. And so we'll see what Dallas ends up being. They're going to be in an arms race like many teams in the Western Conference. And again, you mentioned many of the teams that I would echo that same sentiment to. But just to kind of touch on the Mavericks again, Cooper Flag in the middle of his first summer league game as we are recording this against the Los Angeles Lakers. It's halftime. He's got 10 points on 5 of 15 shooting, but he's tried some just ridiculous plays, some crazy shots. They're just giving him the green light to try some different things out. He's been really impressive. He almost jumped from dang near middle between the 2 foot jump from between the goal and free throw line and almost dunked on somebody just a moment ago. And there's been a lot of possessions where Bronny is the sole defender and given that responsibility as the Lakers are trying to get him to improve and be more comfortable, which we have seen so far in summer league from hit that standpoint. So he maybe could become a player that the Lakers actually could rely on throughout the regular season. And then just want to give shout out AJ Mitchell from the Thunder has been awesome throughout the Salt Lake City Summer League. VJ Edgecombe had a ridiculous debut against Ace Bailey, who struggled a little bit from the field in game one, but really turned it on and had a nice performance as the Utah Jazz is pretty much playing their entire active real NBA roster because they've decided to get rid of everybody that's not a young player. Ace Bailey had an impressive second game. Cooper Flag, all sorts of highlights right now. The summer league is a great time of year where you get to kind of see some of these young guys go out there and just experiment with their game, try to improve, look to just build some positive moments, get their feet wet in the league against grown men. They're going to have some learning curves early in these games. Don't overreact to it. We saw Yama have a terrible first summer league game, come out the next game 25 and 10, and the Spurs are like, yeah, this guy's too good. We're shutting him down. Spurs are already doing that with Dylan Harper, haven't played him yet. They're going to hold him out. He's going to play Saturday, most likely against Cooper Flag in his first summer league game, then probably play against Ace Bailey and call it a summer league. And so, fun time of year. You get out and get a chance to watch some of these summer leagues games. I would recommend to do so.
Yeah, it looks like as we're on here, Cooper Flag and Bronny James are just going at it. I mean, wouldn't have had that on my bingo card, many years ago, but here we are. Yeah, they are just telling Cooper Flag, just go out there and just show us anything you got on offense. Don't pass the ball, which, maybe that's what Adam Silver's wanting, just to see what they got. And, this is what Jason Kidd said. I listened to that press conference there. Cooper Flag said that they were just going to try things out there. So, like you said, people are going to judge these games, and you just can't. I mean, like you said, Cooper Wembanyama's first game was a disaster, and then his second game he looked elite, and now look at him, he's just fine, and he's going to be just as pretty much advertised. So they're fun to watch, but it's more experimental. The rules are a little different, trying to test things out. So we can't go out there and we got to restrict ourselves from jumping too far on the gun one way or another here in the summer league. But it is a fun time. Basketball just never stops, especially in the NBA. This feels like the season almost, with as much moves and drama that is going on. But it's just been a lot of fun to cover, and we hadn't been able to record, so we wanted to try and jump into as many things all over the league as we could.
Yeah, it was a hodgepodge of different things. We kind of bounced all over the place. It wasn't maybe as structured as what we typically do, but that's what happens when you miss the start of free agency and you're a week behind. So we hope that we caught you up to speed as best we could, gave adequate thoughts on all the major transactions. It will be slow news days moving forward as there's not going to be a ton to talk about outside of we'll touch on some of the summer league stuff as it rolls through, and then we'll start getting into some fun off-season topics where we're just going to have random scenarios or topics of historic or even jump into maybe some NFL as we get closer to the start of football season. And again, we still plan to do our top 10 players all time. That list will take place soon. But with everything going on over the last couple of months, we didn't want to, we wanted to spend adequate time and really think over those thoughts. But a lot to look forward to still, even though it's the off season, things are getting slower. So be on the lookout for podcasts as they come through. Give us off season suggestions. And please listen wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. Find us on Instagram and Twitter at the State Line Fast Break Podcast. This has been episode 24, and we thank you for listening.